Welcome to The Business Strategist, the show for CEOs and founders ready to scale fast, lead smarter, and build a business that doesn't rely on them. I'm Adam Strong, award-winning strategist, former elite athlete, international speaker, and 3 times best-selling author. After 3 decades in business, I know exactly what it takes to grow, scale, and exit with impact. Each week, I dive into real conversations with industry experts, bold entrepreneurs, and clients navigating the uphill struggles of business, giving you the tools, the strategies to create more profit, more freedom, and more impact. Let's get into it.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
What if instead, over the next 5 years, rather than trying out maneuvering your competitors, you quietly bought the one that was actually stealing your clients? What if you could actually take over your biggest competitor in your industry with zero money down? It could be zero money down or with money. But what would you actually do? Like, what's the actual breakdown? What's the playbook? What's the strategy? Or would you actually freeze? Tell me what's going through your mind right now when it comes to breaking down and acquiring your competitors. Now, today we brought back the maestro himself, Mr. Jeremy Harbour, of course. Jeremy was here on the show about 9 months ago, depending on when you listen to this, of course. Jeremy is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author and is the founder of the Harbour Club, which is the largest M&A community of its kind. And is also, he's actively doing 1 to 2 mergers and acquisition deals on a monthly basis. And we were just actually having a good catch up with Jeremy and just seeing what was happening. Now, today's a little bit different because last time we actually went into how to buy companies with no money down. And rather than kind of starting up your company, we were having this discussion around buying an established business. What we're going to do today is obviously talk a little bit about, if you've got a business, why not acquire your competitor instead? And that to me makes complete sense. Rather than kind of throwing money at advertising, at marketing campaigns, at AI agents, whatever it is that kind of floats your boat, acquiring your competitors. So I think this kind of makes a lot of sense to me. Today, I want to make sure that you guys are listening in. Number one, make sure you got a notebook and pen handy. I know that Jeremy is going to give you guys a masterclass. We're going to go through some really interesting topics around this for someone that is in the trenches, buying and selling businesses on a daily basis. So without further ado, Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you doing? Good to be back.
Likewise, great to have you back on the show again. And we had a lot of fun last time. So I was like, hell, well, why not we have you back, Jeremy?
Absolutely. Third time lucky, though, apparently.
Third, I think absolutely 100%. It's really fascinating to hear what you guys are doing. And, you know, it's interesting, like 9 months ago, since our last conversation, I mean, the world's moved on quite substantially, hasn't it? The world's in what I call a bit of a funny place right now. It doesn't matter where you are in this world, whether you're on an island in the middle of nowhere or you're in the Western world. I don't know if you would agree on that, and how that. Do you think that affects the whole kind of M&A industry as a whole? What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, we're in a period at the moment of unprecedented instability. Funnily enough, I was talking to somebody from the security services this morning about that. I left the UK when Gordon Brown came to power because I thought everything was a total shit show. Actually, I mean, that was probably peak optimism at that point compared to where we are now. And yet I remember it being a very down, dreary, dismal time. And in fact, shortly after I left, we ran full force into the global financial crisis. So literally that lack of optimism turned into a pretty nasty place. And Now it's much, much worse. I mean, and by the way, I left the country then because I felt small business and entrepreneurship was under attack and underappreciated. And never before have I seen it so under attack and so underappreciated as it is now. I think everybody has completely lost sight of the fact that small businesses pay for everything. Big businesses don't pay tax. Small businesses pay tax and hire people who pay tax and contribute the most to the economy of anyone else. Most businesses are small. There are only a very small number of businesses that are big. And this is the absolute engine of the economy. And the more they stamp on their heads, the worse things are going to get. And this whole idea that by stamping on their heads, they'll somehow have more money to spend on public services is an absolute, ridiculously economically illiterate load of crap. I know people will be watching this at all different times. Maybe even it might be 2026 and we're in the middle of World War III or something. But we are in an hour. We're about to have the second budget from the fucking National Union of Students represent to the government, who is going to come out with yet more inane, ridiculous policies around how to grow an economy by taxing the shit out of all the people that produce stuff.
Absolutely.
But the great thing is that creates all of that nonsense creates opportunity, because when everything is sailing along plain, big businesses can just dominate the universe of operations. When you have disruption from AI and then the deliberate disruption of government, it creates perversions in the free market, and it's those positions that entrepreneurs are fantastically good at exploiting. So this, whilst it's depressing to watch the news from a big picture perspective and from a how many decades is it going to take to repair the last decades.
Many decades.
Yeah, it kind of, and I'm in my 50s now, so I'm kind of thinking, well, it's not going to be fixed in my lifetime at this rate. So, that's depressing, but it also creates lots of opportunities, and we'd be remiss not to talk about those opportunities. And look, some of the really big trends are the fact that most businesses are small. And most businesses are owned by baby boomers, people that need to retire in the next few years. They don't have any choice, and they've just found out that they're going to be screwed in their retirement as well. So most of them are probably wanting to leave the country. And so that creates an additional motivation for them to, leave the country, sell their business, get out of what they're doing. Small businesses are inherently unsellable things. They're very, very difficult to sell. Only 8% of the businesses listed actually go on to be sold. Most of these baby boomers believe they can sell their businesses for lots of money. In fact, they're often told so by business brokers. Then they advertise them for a couple of years, realize there aren't any natural buyers for their business, and they typically end up just winding these companies down. So as staff retire, they don't rehire. As technology comes out, they don't renew, and they basically just take it down to a point where it's almost ready to die, and then they lock the doors. The offers that they're getting, the cash offers for these businesses, are often around 1 times earnings. So they're only going to get a year's worth of earnings. So why not just keep it for a year, take the same amount of cash out and close the thing? So the traditional approach doesn't really work with these guys. You've got to give them something different. And if they want to get out of their business, they're going to have to do a collaborative deal with someone. So they're going to have to work with somebody to do it. Now, there is still the 8% that can sell, and they've got fully systemized businesses that work without them, that have recurring revenue, that have good diversification of clients, that have enough scale that they can tolerate having highly paid management run them. But those are the proverbial hen's teeth. They are not that, they're not that popular. They're not that available. So there's a ton of opportunity. Most businesses would be a good target, and people don't know how to target them. People don't know how to talk to them. So if you can crack that, it's blue ocean.
Yeah, I think you made a couple of valid points there. And point number one was last week actually I was actually speaking with Dr. Rebecca Holmes, and she's basically an economist, but she's also written a fascinating book around the whole kind of, I suppose, and our discussion was all around how the world is in a bit of a funny place right now, but how does that translate into, how can you basically pivot off of uncertain times? Because there's going to be a minority, you rightly pointed it out, that 8% of those businesses, because there are entrepreneurs and there are people out there that thrive in down markets and do exceptionally well. They mop up while people's confidence are at an all-time low. But they come in like, Robin Hood would come in and literally just take the opportunity, because to them, it's like, well, there's lots of opportunity. They see something completely different to normal people. What's your thoughts about this? Like, why is the figure so low?
The figure so low for acquisition?
Yeah. Why is it that it's 8%?
These are highly volatile assets. They lose 2 customers or 2 key staff, they could cease to exist. So how much risk do you want to take? How much of a premium do you want to pay over what you're going to take out of it next year? And the answer is not very much, because let's face it, you could also invest in your own business and make your own business more efficient, do more marketing, those kind of things, or you could buy this other business and have all the integration risk and everything else. So people aren't particularly bullish about taking these things on. But what's interesting is, when just took a random business, I mean, something like, let's say, the local window company that has a small factory that manufactures windows, and then they have a sales team that go out and sell to people and they're installing windows. Just as for example, every town has a few of them,
Absolutely.
Now, if you think about your customers have less money in their pockets, so they're buying less windows. So your revenues drop by 30% or so. You've then got Rachel from accounts deciding that you should pay more in national insurance and taxes. So you've had your sales constricted and now you've had your costs increase, on top of the normal inflationary impact that the government's having on you anyway, which is forever squeezing you in the middle. You can either just carry on and try and market your way out of that situation where every lead and every sale is costing you more and more because they're harder and harder to find, or you could go and buy the other window company in the town or in a different town. You could probably get rid of their factory and make all their windows for them. You could move, get rid of half their team and operate from your business. And because they're also experiencing the same squeeze you are, they're not going to be terribly expensive. And if they want to retire, you can provide a kind of managing them out of the business solution where you work with them over a period of time for them to extract maximum value from the business and for you to be able to integrate it. And, an approach like that, gives you a 2 + 2 = 4 approach and a new brand and potentially a new geography that you can target. And there's probably quite a few like that you could go and look at. And what's really interesting, I mean, everybody knows you should keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. And yet so often businesses are afraid to go and talk to their competitors. And yet when you do talk to your competitors, you'll realize they're human beings and they're actually all right, and they're facing many of the same challenges that you're facing. And that if you deal with them on a collaborative basis, it's us against the world sort of approach. You're far more likely to be successful than you are sneering about them and trying to make enemies of them. And what's interesting, we see this a lot in my Harbour Club community when somebody first buys a business, because the business owner, the founder, has always refused to speak to their competitors. It's like it's the enemy. And when a staff member leaves and goes to that company, well, that company must be shit. And all they can say is bad things. Well, when you take over one of these businesses and you've got this clean sheet of paper and you engage with some of these competitors, you realize that actually they're great places to do stuff. And also, you often find they've got really good people. Really good people are hard to find, but every small business has a star or has a few stars in their midst. That's what keeps them going. You can't hire these people because one of the things that makes them good is that they're loyal. So they won't just leave for a higher package. They'll stay there. So if you acquire the business, you also acquire the talent that's in the business, and you create a far more vibrant talent pool in your own company as you
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to kind of tap into your own experience here, because I know that you work with lots of people that buy and sell businesses within the Harbour Club community. But with regards to your own personal experience, you're probably going back a long time ago, but when was the first competitor that you tried to buy, and what did you do wrong within that process?
The first, I had a mobile phone business and I bought another mobile phone business, and it was actually my first deal ever. And at the time, I'd never thought about buying something that wasn't a competitor. Now, prior to doing that deal, I had dismissed the idea of doing M&A because, well, I didn't know how to do it. It was probably a big factor. So there was
Yep.
an ignorance aspect, and there was a capital issue as well. I didn't have any money. My choices were paying the staff or the credit card bill, not buying some business. And banks wouldn't lend me money. Neither would I have if I was them. So that was a restrictive aspect to it. And then telecoms, I was lucky because it just is a very acquisitive industry.
Yes.
Back then, it was incredibly fragmented. It had gone through this astonishing growth phase, but then it had hit a saturation point. So all of the things that used to work didn't work anymore. So, before nobody had a phone, so it was so easy. But now everybody had a phone. It was more like the insurance business. You're waiting for their contract to expire before you can bring them over. And there's a million choices that they have. So why should they choose you? And it's a commodity. So again, why should they choose you? So it was very hard to win new customers. And so the easiest way to get new customers was to buy someone else's, to buy a company that already had those customers, and then you could grow, very quickly. Everyone was trying to buy my business. And when they were trying to buy my business, I got to sit opposite them on a table while they pitched me on why they should be the new owner of my company. And of course, if you take that as an education process, you just let 50 people pitch you and you pick all the things that almost made you do it. What was the most compelling parts of their arguments, and you build your own argument that you then take out to other people. And the reassuring thing was, my fear of doing it was based around not having any money and not knowing what I was talking about. And the great thing was neither did they. No one approached me that had money or had experience at doing this. They were all making it up, went along. And while some of them sounded more confident, scratched beneath the surface, and they didn't have a fucking clue what they were doing. Money. That gave me the confidence that I could possibly do this too. I identified a company relatively quickly after I decided that I wanted to do it. And I tried to put a deal together in my mind with with no money up front because I didn't have any. They wanted a little bit of money up front. And I think this is most people's perception, that there's some kind of little bit of cash up front and then the rest of it can be deal structured and done like that. But honestly, I did the deal without anything up front out of sheer necessity. I didn't have anything. And I think the mistake I made was believing that I would lose the deal if I didn't come up with this money up front. And I wasted a lot of time running around trying to raise money, trying to borrow money, trying to, figure out how to do it without realizing that I was probably the only game in town and that they didn't really have any other options. And then if I just ballsed it out and said, no, this is the offer and that's it, instead of, okay, I'll try and raise the funds kind of approach, this idea that there was a queue of people lined up with the checkbook ready to go was just not true and isn't true now. There's a buyer's market.
Yeah, I was going to say, because like you mentioned a really valid point there, and I educate a lot of people within M&A. We're going through an interesting time where baby boomers control 80% of the world's wealth, and a lot of these operating based businesses are up for grabs. And I think the sweet spot is generally between $500K and $2 million, something around that would be a gritty. Would you agree on that? Was it a lot of
that baby boomer play? I mean, those are the ones that you can for sure pick up for nothing. No money down, not for nothings. No money down doesn't mean no money. It just means none of your own money.
Yeah, sure.
And so, they're absolutely in that sort of, I would say even up to 5 million, depending on the sector. So 500,000 to 5 million is like virgin territory where there's really no competition from other people trying to do that deal, or no kind of natural trade buyer or private equity or anything like that. And basically, if you can show them that you're a safe pair of hands, you're going to protect their legacy, you're going to get them a decent amount of money out of the business over a period of time, you become a viable option to winding it down and closing it down. And then above that sort of 5 million, there's also a window, I would say, sort of 5 million to 20 million, where there's lots of opportunities available. You've got a bit more competition, so you have to have a more compelling proposition for them. But if you've already got a business in that sector, that can be the compelling proposition. There's a few things that you would need to have to be able to get into that space. But again, there's not a lot of competition. You might find a couple of trade buyers in there that wouldn't mind adding 20 million to their revenue, but they're not going to be particularly aggressive or throwing money around like lunatics. And then when you start to get above that, then the competition starts to thicken up a bit. So I normally describe it, I might have said this on the last conversation we had,
Mhm.
but I describe it as those two triangles, the first, or two pyramids. All the businesses in the world are like this. You've got a few big ones and tons of small ones. And then all the buyers in the world are the opposite. So there's hardly anybody at the bottom and there's loads of people that can buy the big ones. So as you move up the scale pyramid, as you become bigger, the audience of buyers widens. And so two things happen. One, it becomes easier to sell, but also it increases the valuation that you'll get for the business, because if you've got more buyers than sellers, the price is going to go up. And so this is why roll-up strategies and group strategies in the Harbour Club are super hot at the moment, because if you buy a single business, reselling it is quite tricky. But if you buy a single business and then use that as leverage to buy two or three other small businesses, you move up a bit on the pyramid, you widen the audience of buyers, and suddenly you can sell the business more easily, and you can sell it for considerably more as a multiple of earnings than you could lower down the pyramid.
Are you planning to sell your business in the next 3 to 5 years? Then you already know it's not just about finding a buyer, it's about actually protecting what you've actually built. That's where our sponsor, Adam Benedict, comes in. They're one of the leading premier M&A legal firms trusted by founders to simplify complex exits, protect value, and deliver results. Now, if you want a smart, smoother, and strategic exit, visit adambenedict.co.uk. So you're saying, okay, let me just get some context there, because I was a little bit confused. Instead of buying just a business, what you're saying is you buy a business which might be in the same industry, but as a group. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So if you can't beat them, buy them. If you, instead of competing with them, add them to your group and increase the value for everybody. So, and there's lots of different ways you can do those deals. You can even merge companies together. The current shareholders become shareholders in the new entity, because there's a magnification effect that happens. So, we already talked about these micro businesses that might only get 1 times earnings. Well, a little bit bigger and they might get 2 or 3 times earnings. And a bit bigger than that, they might get 5 or 6 times earnings. And then if you can get into the, millions of earnings, then you start to get into the sort of 8 to times earnings. So there's a magnifying impact of putting these businesses together.
One of the things that came to my mind, actually, especially because I think we both have very similar conversations with buyers and sellers in the M&A industry. And I think one of the conversation that often comes up, Jeremy, is there's a lot of founders out there that have this mindset of, I'm too small to either buy or sell. And there's this general, belief system that they have ingrained into their mindset that they need to address in order to overcome that. Like I'm sure there's people within the Harbour Club also have those belief systems. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, look, it really just comes down to learning about this stuff. Half the battle is getting the right knowledge and information.
Yes.
The problem is most of the books on it are written by advisors. So they're really focused on how you get more advisors. It's more, more about their particular industry is the solution to everything. Yes. And then the M&A firms, the advisory firms themselves, again, tend to be focused on traditional M&A and the larger sort of transactions. And that doesn't necessarily translate terribly well into an owner manager. When you're dealing with the owner of a business, it's often a more emotional animal, perhaps, than the traditional corporate finance approach. They have hot buttons that don't make any sense to somebody that's never been an entrepreneur. But if you've been an entrepreneur, it's much easier to empathize with these people and to build rapport with these people, because we kind of know where they're coming from, what they're trying to achieve. And it isn't always a rational outcome. And that really confuses finance people. Yeah. And then a lot of the websites around M&A are either people trying to sell you training courses on M&A. I'm afraid there is a lot of those who can do, those who can't teach operators out there. I was chatting to somebody the other day, actually, about how many of them are out there teaching stuff, but don't actually do deals. And I mean, my challenge is I don't teach enough because I'm always doing deals. So people want us to do more live events. We only do 2 live events a year. They want us to do more live events. They want us to do more training courses and things like that. And I just don't have the time because we're genuinely doing deals. But the great thing is, we've got an event coming up in a couple of weeks, and when I'm there, I'm going to be able to talk about the last 6 deals we did, which are in the last 8-9 weeks. So we've got some really good new case studies, new examples, things that we've tried that seem to be working really well. So there's, you're constantly keeping the information sharp when you're at the coalface dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. And it's fascinating. The beginning of our conversation was all about, the insanity of the regime in the UK. And actually that's a huge driver for a lot of the deals that I've been doing as well. One was a US company, but they have their own brand of insanity, different reasons. But again, that's creating, all the tariffs and all that stuff. It's creating huge instability. And that's creating opportunity.
I think it was a few days ago, and there was just a dialogue that I was observing. And basically, in a nutshell, there was a person within the group that were looking to they were hunting, or they were looking to purchase a company with zero money down. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting, Jeremy, how much stick that this guy was getting, because it was very judgmental on the other person's part.
Yeah.
And I think what that does is it really kind of zapped his confidence. It's like, okay, I shouldn't have maybe said anything. Do you get that a lot, within the MMA community?
I would imagine that person has done a bit of cursory research online, but has decided not to pay for information, or has decided not to join a community to understand how it works. Because if you reach out to people and say, I would like to buy a business with no money down, everyone is going to shoot you down in flames. It's a ridiculous thing to say, to be honest. So the better thing would be to be very specific about what you are looking for. I'm looking for a window manufacturing business in the southeast of England, or wherever it is, ideally 500,000 to 5 million in revenue, owner managed. Be really specific about the type of business you need, and then go have the conversation with the business owner, because the people he's pitching are not the people that need to know it's no money down. He's talking to the wrong people. The person that needs to know that is the business owner, and they need to know why and the reasons why, and why it's better to do something with you than it is to maybe take a cash offer from somebody else, one and done and it's all over. Maybe it's better to do something collaboratively. You'll get more money over time. Your staff will get retained. There are other fringe benefits that can be brought to the party. So, I guess it's somebody always described to me the difference between a salesman and an entrepreneur is a salesman knows who to pitch, whereas entrepreneurs pitch fucking everyone.
It's so true.
Doesn't matter if you're a potential target, you're going to hear about this shit whether you like it or not. Yeah. And I think they need to think a little bit more like a salesperson and a little bit less like an entrepreneur. Because a salesperson needs, the first thing they do is qualify the audience and decide who's worth pitching.
Very good. Love that. It's a great answer. Now, I want to kind of take a back step, because you mentioned at the very beginning around the whole kind of first conversation. Okay, so for our listener who's thought, do you know what? I've got an idea of a competitor that I have in mind that I'd like to potentially acquire. Yeah. How do you start that first conversation? What's the approach that you would recommend without kind of feeling like they're not interested or being judgmental in any way, shape or form? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so look, the key thing is building rapport.
Yes.
So, and if you're not entirely sure on the meaning of rapport, Google it and have a read and watch.
The opposite to insecurity, by the way, ladies and gents.
But it's really important, because it's an unusual word. It's not a word we always use in daily life. But Tony Robbins talks a lot about rapport. His definition is probably a pretty good one.
Yes.
Chris Voss, who wrote Never Split the Difference, he describes it as tactical empathy. So again, maybe listen to his definition of tactical empathy, which he's given 1 million times on various podcasts and things like that. So, but basically, you need to build rapport with the business owner, and really just try. The obvious outreach is that we've both been in this industry, for a number of years. Never had the chance to talk to you. I thought it would be great idea to get to know each other a little bit, and see if there's any areas of collaboration where we might be able to work more efficiently together, and have that kind of a meeting. Don't say you're looking to buy them or anything like that. And then in that conversation, figure out their end game. What's your plan for this? Are you planning to grow it and sell it? Are you planning to retire at some point? Are you planning to buy other competitors? What's your what are you doing? And see if you can get them to think about that, because, they might well say, yeah, I'm looking to retire in the next couple of years. And then it might be, well, okay, what's the trigger for retiring? Is it a particular number value that you need to get to, or is it more of an endurance test that you have to get to a certain age and then you're going to stop? So, because again, challenging that thinking and making people think, why is it 2 years? Because a lot of people say, well, actually, the most common answer is 3 to 5 years. Because 3 to 5 years, just far enough down the track, I don't have to deal with it now or think about it now, and very non-specific. And so when you start to challenge people on that, what's going to happen in 3 years then that's different to now? And when they stop and think about it, they go, actually fucking nothing really. And so what it's more likely is that either they need something else to step into, they're looking for a new career, something else, the next phase of their life, or there's some sort of monetary number that they need to get to, whether that's dealing with some debt that they've got or a mortgage or something like this, that they'd like to get rid of. And so, there can be different kind of end game motivations. And so if you can understand what that is, then you can present something to them that potentially gets them to that place a bit sooner.
Yep. Love that. It's kind of like looking for kind of the gap in between what's the real reason why you're in business in the first place. And, I think that's a great start.
People are terrible at thinking about this shit because they get really bogged down in the day-to-day stuff. So if you look at their list of things to do today, which is normally 50% firefighting and if you're lucky, 50% vaguely tactical or strategic stuff, nowhere in there is the what the fuck am I doing with my life question. So that always gets punted, to the next day, to the next day, to the next day. And by the way, I mean, again, I don't know when people are listening to this, because people listen to this all, throughout the year, but we're just coming up to end of year. And this is an amazing time for people to evaluate what they're doing. And so actually what we tend to find is people that we pitch now, are, is really good because they talk about it over the Christmas dinner table and they decide in January. Interestingly, divorces spike like crazy in January because it's the time people get to discuss it and then decide to make a change. And same with doing something about their day job, their business.
Hey guys, I just wanted to grab your attention because we've just created a brand new resource for you guys called the Exit Playbook, how to shift from operator to visionary leader. Now, this was based on a podcast that I did a few months ago and is the leadership blueprint for being able to help yourself successfully exit your business. Now, we go into many different things. We're going into some of the common symptoms of why founders get trapped in operations and what to look for and the impact that it actually has on you. We also go into some deep dive exercises that addresses some of the fears, some of the reflections, also how to basically let go of some of the control that you have. But more importantly, how to shift your identity within your business and how to align your strategy to your exit and how to challenge your belief systems, more importantly. Listen, it is a free playbook. The link is in the show description notes. Enjoy. I think you're going to find it a really useful resource. Take care. Yeah. For full disclosure, by the way, ladies and gents, we're not here to discuss relationships or family counseling.
Oh, fair enough. Yes.
As we move on. So interestingly enough, and God, he's going to put a curveball in here.
I had a funny conversation yesterday with somebody that when I was talking to them about why they wanted to do it, it was because they're getting divorced. And I said, okay, so you're looking for wife-changing money.
Whatever motivates you, ladies and gents, whatever motivates you.
Indeed.
For you guys that are listening in, by the way, I hope so far you've been able to extract some of the golden nuggets that Jeremy's dropping here. I think that it's very much in tune with the way the world is right now. And what I was going to say to you, if you haven't already checked out Jeremy's LinkedIn profile and website and the Harbor Club, etc., make sure you can do that. Check out the links, etc. Anyway, quick one that came to my mind, and not even just going back to your first experience when you bought a competitor, but even so, like, what do you look for? If you have a client that came to you, for example, maybe one of the Harbor Club members, and they said, well, I'm thinking about acquiring a competitor. And they say to you, well, what are the red flags that you would look for that would say, stay away from that competitor? Is there any red flags that kind of spring to mind?
Well, so it's really interesting people talk about this because, I mean, of course there could be, and you kind of have to wait to see one to say, oh no, I don't like that. I mean, I had one, it was a wealth management company. On the face of it, looked like a great deal. I would only be putting £1 in up front. But when you Googled them, they were all over the Mail on Sunday or Daily Mail, like rip-off section,
God, scam section.
Yeah. So the juice wasn't worth the squeeze when it came to the reputational risk of doing the transaction. And so that's an example of a red flag would be, is there too much reputational risk associated with a transaction? Yes. But generally speaking, all the things that put off traditional buyers, so things like client concentration, too much money coming from a single client, and therefore if the client leaves, you're fucked. Or employee concentration, or too much owner risk because they control everything or have all the relationships with clients. All of those are typical things that would put off a traditional buyer. All of those things are actually things that we can leverage to turn it into a no money down transaction, because we can say, this transaction doesn't stack up because of X, Y, and Z. However, if we work together collaboratively, we can get you to a decent exit value. You're just going to have to wait a bit while we extract this value together. And then, my solution to everything, because I'm a broken record when it comes to doing deals, my solution to everything is to buy a business. And most of those problems that you can find can be resolved by buying another business in the same sector. So if they've got client concentration, you buy another company, you've got more diversity of clients. If you've got employee concentration, having a deeper management team that you've acquired through another acquisition can be a great way. Finding new leadership can be done through acquisition. So there's, a lot of these issues can be resolved by creating a group and putting businesses together. So if they've got weaknesses, they've still got clients, and those clients have value, and you can move them into another entity. So most of the red flags are actually opportunistic red flags. So they're sticks you can use to beat them into doing a better deal.
I suppose in a way they're like red herrings, but kind of in disguise.
And what's great is it gets rid of the competition. So they can't do a leverage buyout because the banks won't lend them money because of the issues. You won't get the search funds or the corporate finance guys doing those deals because of those issues. So they really find themselves even more isolated than other small businesses when it comes to being able to get a transaction done. And most small businesses aren't kind of, sale ready or investor ready when you come across them. They don't have the data room. They don't have processes documented. They don't have the things that a buyer would need in order to be able to take it over. And what's interesting is they kind of know this, but they also don't have the appetite to do this themselves. So they find themselves in this sort of paralyzed position of knowing what they need to do, but not wanting to do it. So if you then provide a solution where they don't have to do it, or you're going to do it with them, or anything other than them having to do it, it's very appealing.
But I suppose in a way, then, if you are one of those people that are looking to potentially buy a business that doesn't have all of the things that you'd mentioned, in a way, then it's kind of like, well, am I wasting my time? Where is the risk associated with that? I mean, there is potentially a high payoff where you could buy the business for less than what it's really valued at. But then the other spin to that coin would be is you might discover something within the due diligence process or whatever it might be that kind of crops up, and you're like, I can't help this guy anymore or girl with buying their business. I can't do it because it's incongruent or whatever it is. Like, how do you kind of get around that?
Yeah, look, the whole key to this is to try and create asymmetric risk. So focus on all the potential downsides and take those away so that you only leave room for upside. And the most obvious downside is you can put a load of money into it. So if you take that off the table, then you can tolerate most other risks, because most other risks can be dealt with post-deal. And then if you're going to have some kind of earn-out or some kind of deferred payment structure associated with the transaction, you also have representations and warranties from the seller that certain facts are true. And that if you discover that they're not true, that you can offset those against the deferred payments that are due to them. And so you then build a kind of confidence from them that the information they've given you is correct. And so they put their money where their mouth is, effectively.
Yep.
And so
that's good.
So if you can de-risk it in those ways, you can be a lot more bullish about the types of deals that you take on. Ultimately, if it's a basket case, you can asset strip it and put the customers into a company that works. And again, the customers have value. So if you've got rid of all the other associated costs and you just put the customers into another business that can service them, that's huge value to the company that you put them into.
Yep, love that. When it comes to evaluate, you mentioned earlier on, which was like, if you've got too much concentration of particular customers or staff, whatever it is, how does one evaluate that process? Is there a specific tool or an assessment, or is it just kind of like intuition? What do you use?
Yeah, no, it's part of the kind of fact finding bit that you use at the beginning. I mean, as a sort of template, if you Google due diligence questionnaire, I think 200,000 results or something like that. The same, just pick one. And I mean, you could even use something like ChatGPT and say due diligence questionnaire for a window manufacturer installer, and it might give you, something more specific that gives you the BSI standards and things like this. And then basically work through that and create a Dropbox or a Google Docs kind of repository where all that information gets put. And bear in mind, they will do most of the legwork on this. So what you're doing is asking them to populate this data. There is also, it's interesting that if this is hard for them, that's one of those red flags that allows you to make an asymmetric deal with them. Because if they can populate it all in a day, then it's probably quite a well-run, well-organized business. If it takes them a week or a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, then you can raise that as being a significant risk factor for anyone wanting to do a deal, that this information is not at their fingertips. And therefore, it would be very hard for them to sell to a traditional buyer. Therefore, here's the deal I'm going to propose.
Yeah, love that. Some good stuff. We talked about red flags. What about green flags? Like, say, for example, you're in, I don't know, negotiation, or you're kind of in that due diligence process, and you're kind of like, I'm in an R-in about the fact that, is this worth fighting for, or do I walk away? Like, what are the green flags that kind of like would say, you know what, it is worth fighting for?
Yeah.
It is worth going forwards.
It's mostly about people, actually.
People, okay.
So if the people are really compliant and do what they're asked, and they do it in an efficient way, and they're friendly and they're helpful and, motivated, it's probably going to be a good deal. If they're negative, they push back, they say, it's not done this way, we can't do it like that, no, then it's probably going to be a bad deal. So there's just an immediate green flag when people are helpful and compliant, because you can probably work with them going forwards. And even if there are problems, you can probably come to a reasonable solution with them. So, people is a big green flag moment.
Love that. That's a good point, actually, because that moves beautifully into kind of like, I feel like a lot of people that go into the whole kind of acquisitions part, especially, I think one of the most reluctant reasons why they don't go for it is because they're scared of what potentially could happen post-deal, whether it be staff drama, whether it be clients leaving, whether it be a culture fallout, whatever it might be. But how do you de-risk, should we say, integration so that it doesn't turn into a bloody nightmare?
Yeah, really funny. I have this debate a lot internally with Harbour Club, because in the Harbour Club community, we have a lot of integrators. So we have people that are, they've done this dozens of times. They love it. They've all SOPs written around how you do integration. Whereas I don't touch it. I hate it. I don't do it. I just let them get on with it. I really, what I find is that when you first buy a business, everyone shits themselves that everything's going to change, and they get very nervous. And if you can give them the welcome speech that nothing's going to change, and then actually do nothing, that's quite powerful. It's an incredibly calming force to not be interfering in the business from day one. Now, we do a lot of interfering in the background, so how the accounts are presented, how we recognize revenue, accounting treatments, things like that, which don't affect the staff and don't affect anybody in the business, but massively affect how the business looks to the outside world. But yeah, we're very, very light touch on businesses, and we very much put the trust in management to know more than we do and to get on and do stuff. And I'm sure this will elicit lots of responses from people listening that I'm completely wrong, and I'll contemplate that over a mojito on my yacht.
Good valid point. Love that. What would you say? I mean, because you're, especially with people dealing in the Harbour Club, and you would have seen probably every mistake made under the sun. When it comes to buying your competitors specifically, what would you say is probably, maybe you've done it yourself, some of the most common mistakes that people make in the first 90 days?
Yeah, good question. So the first one is acquiring the business with your business. So you've got your company, you go and buy the other company, and your company is the shareholder of that company.
Uh-huh.
It creates contracting party risk because your company is signing a contract with the other party. And with contracting party risk, you can be sued for breach of contract. So we always create an SPV to go and buy the competitor. So we have a standalone shell company effectively that does the acquisition. All of the integration and merging and collaboration can be done between two separate companies. You don't have to physically put them together in one entity. And that's a really common fallacy, that you have to do it in that way in order for it to be able to have the synergies and the values. Now, you might put them under a common holding company so that you get the consolidated accounts. So you move up the pyramid, but you don't put them underneath each other.
Uh-huh.
So put a holding company on top that owns both of them is the better approach. The other one is around rebranding. Yep. So people are obsessed with the idea of changing the name above the door. Pretty much the only value you get from buying a company is the reputation it has with its staff and its customers. It's brand. Now, you call it a brand, everyone calls it a brand, but to be honest, unless you're doing $1 billion in revenue, you don't really have a brand. Nobody knows you. You know, these are micro companies, so they have a micro brand. But that micro brand is what you're buying. So why would you buy it and then throw it down the toilet and put something else above the door, when the salespeople and everybody there are just going to have to spend their whole life explaining that it's the same company, but it's now called this. So you're just wasting time and effort. The other thing is, revising the website, doing the new logos, doing, all of those kind of things. Of course, you can do them at some point, but they're not first things you do. It's a little bit of a waste of time. And then, like I say, that again, and people can disagree with me on this, but it's this interfering on day one thing. What you want to do is put the businesses alongside each other, so they can talk to each other and see if they can find ways to collaborate. Let the management teams speak to each other and explore ways that they could save $1 or make $1. Because if it's your idea, it's fucking terrible. And if it's their idea, it's the best idea ever. So make it their idea. Make them come up with the ideas and implement them, because they will then implement them vigorously and ensure that they're successful because it's their ideas. If it's your idea, they might even deliberately sabotage it just to show you that it was a bad idea. Let play to the human nature of letting them come up with the solutions to the problems. You might coach them in the right direction. You might show them some things that would make them draw a particular conclusion, but let them decide.
Love that. So that's a really, really, really useful tip. What I'd like to do now, if it's okay, I don't know if you remember this, but 9 months ago, we also did an element of coaching where you were coaching me. And I think what I loved about that is that it was really, really practical. And I was thinking to myself, let's do that again. Only because now, for you guys that are listening, by the way, for context, Jeremy's going to coach me. But what I want you to imagine is that Jeremy's actually in the same room as you right now. He's sitting on the sofa opposite to you. And whatever questions that you may have around acquisitions, buying, selling, growing, whatever it might be, just imagine you being that person. Because again, make notes, because I think that this is really going to open up some new eyes. But more importantly, it's going to give you context and insight. I was thinking, so this is what I'm thinking here, Jeremy. We talked about at the very beginning, you made a very valid point around there's a lot of baby boomers coming up for retirement. I'm a big believer that boring businesses are a great acquisition. Whether you agree on that is completely up to you. Boring businesses as in like professional services, your accountancy practice, your IT, that kind of stuff. I call those boring businesses. Mm-hmm. Generally stabilized revenue, etc. Now, I'm quite new to the whole I'm kind of new to acquisitions. I think through our conversations, what I've had with you, through Callum and other people within the industry, I'm convinced that M&A is probably even better when it comes to growing my own consultancy, number one, than it is investing in AI, systemization, marketing, advertising, because, hey, doing that for years anyway. What would you, first of all, when it comes to my first acquisition, why is it that, and again, am I pre-anticipating that I'm going to, what is it that I need to take into consideration when I'm seeking out these boring businesses for acquisition?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just that your calendar, when you look at what you're doing this week, it should contain a number of conversations with people who own businesses that you'd like to own. And, I always challenge people to go back to their last week's calendar and categorize the meetings that they had. And basically your meetings should be about mergers, acquisitions, joint ventures, or exits. Yep. And, I guess apply the 80-20 rule. If you can have 80% of your calendar on those 4 topics and 20% on the other shit that you have to do in your business, you'll be heading, roughly in the right direction. And then if you're a consulting business, there's kind of 2 angles to consider. One is to acquire other consulting businesses, which could be an option. The other one is to acquire the businesses that you consult to. So if you're providing value to some of these boring businesses through your consultancy, then pivoting your consulting offering to an equity offering is quite a simple starting point. So instead of going in with a pure time for money solution, you go for a time for money plus equity kicker solution. And that equity kicker becomes your foot in the door, because once you have your foot in the door, you can do a management buyout, which is to buy the rest of the business that you didn't own before. What's interesting is that approach, we've got multiple names for it in the Harbour Club community. One is a non-executive director buyout. So you become a non-executive director and then buy out. The other one is a WIBO, a work-in buyout, where you do some work in the business and then you buy it out. But yeah, there are different variants, but ultimately the concept is much the same. And actually, there's no money up front. There's no cost of due diligence because you're in the business doing the due diligence while you're there. There's no lawyers or anyone involved because it's a very simple, low-risk transaction that you can do without needing a lawyer to take that initial stake. And so it's a bit of a path of least resistance to getting into a business. Plus, you can also charge the consulting fees. You're getting paid while you do the deal. So you don't have this starvation period while you're waiting for a capital event when you sell the thing. What's interesting is I've seen quite a few people now buy 100% of a company using this model. So they'll take the first 20-30% with a consulting agreement, and they'll buy the rest of it shortly afterwards on a deferred payment, because they built enough, that first couple of months of working with the client, they built enough rapport that they can now pitch them on the long-term deferred payment structure, which they wouldn't be able to pitch at day one because they didn't know them from Adam. So it's that accelerated rapport process that you get in that first couple of months that enables you to buy the rest of it. And what they've ended up doing is not putting any money into the transaction, not signing any personal guarantees, not borrowing any money from banks, and not spending any money on lawyers or due diligence. And so if you compared that to a leverage buyout, the leverage buyout guy probably spent 50 grand speculatively to get to the deal, because they've got to do all the DD and legals up front and hope the bank approves it and hope the DD comes out clean. They've then got a bank that they owe tons of money to over a long period of time. And they've got an owner who's completely lost interest because you've just wired them $2 million.
That's true.
You've basically bet your house and you've used the money to pay the star employee to leave. Can turn into a bit of a shitstorm. So, and by the way, that LBO transaction might take 12 months from start to finish. Banks are incredibly slow. Lawyers are incredibly slow. They're paid by the hour. So you get, guaranteed to get lots of hours. And whereas that consulting to equity to management buyout process can be executed in 6 months, 6 to 9 months in its entirety. So much quicker, much lower risk, much lower cost. And so that's probably the angle that I would pursue in your shoes, is pivot your consulting into that equity and then MBO.
Is that what you would do though if you were in my shoes? That's the kind of avenue that you'd take, right?
Exactly. And when you've done the first one, if it was a law firm or if it was an accounting firm, what you'll find is that you're now suddenly catnip to other law firms or to other accounting firms, because you'll have the experience. The guy that's in the business will probably even give you a reference. So, say what a pleasure it was to do business with you, and you'll just find it much, much easier then to add more of the same to the group. This is what I did for XYZ. A client, I can do the same for you. And then you can start to build a bit of a roll up.
I love that. I think one of the things that kind of springs to my mind, especially when you're inexperienced when it comes to acquisitions, I feel like you probably have this with some of the members, which are very new in their infancy in acquisitions, is this whole kind of, not the fear of unknown, but it's kind of deemed as very complicated acquisitions, because there are a lot of moving parts, isn't there, to acquisitions? And so do you really need to be completely aware and educated on all the components?
No, you don't. Again, being in a community helps because you've got other people you can lean on and get advice from and ask questions to.
Yes.
I mean, also there's certain things. I mean, you can use Chat GPT to ask, if you're going into a regulated business like law firms or accountants, Chat GPT can be quite good on some of the legislative points and just asking questions about that kind of thing. I do a lot of stuff with public companies and public company acquisitions. So, we have this thing called the takeover code, which is the where you have to get takeover panel approval for acquisitions. I've often used Chat GPT to ask questions about the takeover code and specifics about it and things like that. It's very good at that. And again, financial assistance regulations, which disappeared for private companies but still apply for public companies. If you've got a private company you're taking public, does it suffer from financial assistance rules and things like this? All of these types of things are Chat GPT's bread and butter. Going into a statute or a piece of legislation, pulling out, like the Companies Act, pulling out the right bit and telling you what the latest is, because there are also things, because they change all the time. So the Companies Act has had a few revisions over the years, and so there was the Enterprise Act in 2006, the Finance Act in 2009, I think it was, and then the 2017 there was another bunch of stuff that got added. So there are things that you remember that you're misremembering because they've changed, and so having someone to talk to like ChatGPT is quite useful.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good thought. It's interesting. A few months ago, I was approached personally, and this was through LinkedIn, with a lady that has been running an accountancy practice, but she had also through her husband, they'd also created a SaaS company, but they had very small revenues. Like they were really kind of an MPV really. And so but they'd already looking to raise certain amount of capital to get it up and running and whatever it is. They wanted to be the one-stop shop for like accountants in terms of like their software needs. But what was really interesting about it is that the way that we were structuring the deal was they'd pay the fee and then they'd give equity and stuff. But then I thought to myself, well, hang on a minute. Do I really want to be jumping into bed with a startup? Because not for me. I mean, would you recommend doing that if someone that is kind of moving into the whole kind of ideology of acquisitions? You've really got to have some proof of the pudding that the concept works, I guess, right?
Yeah, you have. I mean, we try and walk away from those pre-revenue, early stage type businesses. I say that we've done a couple of pre-revenue businesses, but it's where they've got, in one case, 160 million in purchase orders and 12 years, and they've invested 150 million in the technology. So they were at the end of that journey, and so they're about to have a lot of revenue. So we did that. But most of the time, if they're pre-revenue, we wouldn't touch them. You can pick them up if you can see it strategically fitting with something else that you're doing, or you have a business that you could leverage that into, then you might think about it differently. But if it's on its own, if you're just picking that business up and it has no real relationship or affiliation with anything else you're doing, it's all risk and no reward.
I think one of the things that springs to my mind is that, because we're good friends with Dan Priestley, of course. And I think one of the things that he mentioned was, and this was probably going back a couple of years ago, is that, hey, if you want to go and buy a technology-based business, how does technology-based businesses work differently? How do they value differently? Like, how do we approach it differently? Should we actually do it? Like, especially with the surgence of AI that's kind of coming in now, it feels a little bit risky, but there's also, I see opportunity. How do you kind of see that? Yeah,
look, technology businesses do tend to be valued in a completely different way. Multiples of revenue versus multiples of profit. It's a different kind of animal. But is it better to buy those than buy something else? I couldn't say one way or the other. We've got a Harbour Clubber that successfully bought 3 SaaS companies, and they've managed to buy them using fairly traditional purchasing metrics instead of crazy multiples of revenue, and they've done them with no money down. So they're out there and they're possible. We've done a couple of technology companies, a holographic 3D TV company, a music industry tech solution. But again, often you'll find that those technology companies have a much higher expectation on valuation. But again, it comes to how you structure the deal with them and how you're looking to get your kind of upside. The key thing from our perspective is not putting tons of capital into the transaction and maximizing the potential upside for us and any fellow investors we have coming with us. But I know Dan loves tech and has some good tech businesses. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with him because I've done tech companies too, but I don't particularly care whether they're tech or not tech.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. No, I thought I'd bring that in anyway.
Or agnostic on my side.
Absolutely. So I know that for you guys that are listening in, by the way, I hope you're enjoying our conversations. We're kind of concluding and coming toward the end of our conversation. First of all, Jeremy, I mean, this has been a great conversation, another great conversation. I think it's very much aligned and in tune with, just the way the world is right now. And just, again, hopefully it gives the guys, the listeners, I suppose, an extra artillery in the toolbox to use, whether it be to grow, scale, or exit, whatever it might be. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, other than educate yourself on this stuff. The juice is worth the squeeze. Yeah. I think entrepreneurship has too long been defined by start something and work really hard. And I think there is a fantastic opportunity to not work as hard and to only run the last 10 yards of the marathon and still get a medal. So I would encourage people to learn about it. It's a fascinating topic. I publish tons of free content. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'll give you a 21-day free email course. So every day for 21 days, we'll send you some stuff that teaches you how to source deals, acquire deals, everything like that. Because I think once you go down this rabbit hole, you'll be fascinated.
Love it. Some good stuff. For you guys that are listening, I hope you've enjoyed our conversations with me and Jeremy. Make sure that you go check out Jeremy's book, of course. Check out the Harbour Club. We'll put all the links below. If you have any questions, by the way, feel free to reach out to Jeremy and the team as well around acquisitions. We'll make sure that we put his contact details below as well. If you have any, and for you guys that are listening in, if this is the first time that you're listening in, I think depending on when we're about 370 episodes in or whatever it is. Congratulations, you've managed to find us eventually. But for you guys that are returning, welcome back. Hope you've enjoyed. Please make sure you hit the follow, subscribe button, whether it be listening to YouTube, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple, whichever your podcast poison may be. Anyway, listen, from me and Jeremy, thanks so much for listening in. And hopefully we'll see you again here on The Business Strategist. Take care and we'll speak to you soon.
There's fishing. And then there's fishing. Out here, you're after dinner. Online, hackers are after your data. They'll bait you with fake emails, lookalike sites, anything to lure you in. But with Cisco Duo's end-to-end phishing-resistant access control, every login, every device, every user stays protected. Looks like no one's biting today. Cisco Duo. Phishing season is over. Learn more at duo.com.